Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Wednesday webinar. We'll just give everyone a couple of minutes to join before we get started. Thank you for joining us today. We'll just take another 30 seconds or so for people to join the room, and then we'll get started. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this week's National Bleeding Disorders Foundation, formerly National Hemophilia Foundation, Wednesday webinar. My name is Fiona Robinson, and I am the series host. In today's webinar, entitled From NHF to NBDF, Time for a Change, we will be learning all about this important rebranding. Please feel free to ask any questions you may have throughout the presentation by using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We will monitor these questions as they come in, and I will put them to our speakers at the end of their presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to the community beginning on Friday, September 15th. Today, I'm joined by two speakers, Mary Kate Loconti and Noreen Kahalain, who are partners at Merz, the branding agency who served as partners in this process. I'd like to thank them for joining us today, and with that, I'll turn things over to Noreen to get us started.
Thanks, Fiona. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's Wednesday webinar about NHF's recent and ongoing branding to NBDF. It's been a long 18-month process, but we're very excited to walk you through the process, show you where we've landed, and talk a little bit about how we'll be transitioning the brand over the course of the next year. So we'll just jump right into it. So the goal of the NHF rebranding was to serve the blood and bleeding disorders community by addressing concerns around diversity, inclusion, and equity to ensure every person and family facing an inheritable blood or bleeding disorder has access to the advanced care and support they need, regardless of gender, age, ethnicity, location, or socioeconomic background, so that they can achieve their highest level of health. So now we'll just get a little bit into the process. We had a 5-step process for approaching the rebrand. We started with discovery. And during the discovery phase, we underwent a number of exercises to get a deep understanding of NHF and the community they serve. This meant conducting one-on-one interviews and Zoom focus groups with various members of the NHF community, including board, staff, leadership, community members like yourselves, chapter leadership and staff, medical professionals from HTCs, including doctors, therapists, social workers. And we also deployed different online surveys to chapter representatives and the community. In all, we got input from over 300 people that culminated in a key findings document that laid the groundwork for the rest of the process. The next part of our process was positioning, and during this phase, we took our learnings from the discovery and spent time brainstorming names that would make sense for the organization's future. In all, we came up with about 800 possible name variations, ranging from names that were forward-thinking to thinking about acronyms, and even names that aligned with the existing NHF acronym. We narrowed that initial list down to about 15 finalists that we presented to the Advancement and Communications team. And together with them, further narrowed the names down to 3 finalists that we brought to the same groups that we spoke with during the discovery process to get their feedback. So we landed on the name. We created a tagline and overall value proposition that aligns with the new name and where the organization is going. Then, during the strategic campaign and plan part of the process, we worked on the visual identity, the logos, as well as the brand architecture for the renamed organization. We also developed a plan on how to roll out the new brand both internally and to the community at BDC, where it was launched. And we'll be showing you some photos and samples of that in a little while. Then, in the implementation phase, it was about introducing the new brand at during the opening session at BDC and in the exhibit hall and throughout the conference. This included both the booth, signage, digital ad campaigns, social media, among other things. And the last, but probably the most important part of the process is really the measurement, and that is ongoing now. And it's really listening to the community and others to find out how the brand is being received and seeing how people are engaging with it and really what it means to them, and to making sure that people feel included in the new brand. So now we'll go on to the name, logo, and tagline. And as you all know already, the new name is the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation. And the new name really keeps the familiarity of that and the equity that we had in the original name, because we're still using national and foundation, but just changing out bleeding disorders to ensure inclusivity of all the bleeding disorders that are covered by the organization. And in the logo, you can see 8 different colored blood drops. And again, that's a nod to being inclusive, just to kind of show representation for different and varying conditions. And then the tagline is innovate, educate, and advocate. And that really aligns with the 3 pillars of the organization of research, education, and advocacy. But they're put in the tagline as sort of action words so that, people know that we're still working towards these various areas, and this is our goal. On the next slide, you'll see a Spanish version of the logo and tagline. And then we'll get into the mission and vision. So the mission of the organization, the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation, is dedicated to finding cures for inheritable blood and bleeding disorders and to addressing and preventing the complications of these disorders through research, education, and advocacy, enabling people and families to thrive. Now, this mission statement might sound familiar to you because it really hasn't changed much. The only differences from NHF's mission statement are to change the name to the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation. And additionally, we added "and bleeding," where it talks about finding cures for inheritable blood and bleeding disorders. So really, they were the only changes made to the mission. And the vision statement is a world without inheritable blood disorders. And again, the vision statement did not change at all from what NHF's vision had been previously. On the next slide, you'll see both presented in Spanish. And then we'll talk about the brand architecture. So on the next slide, you will, the goal of the organized architecture is really, again, to better serve the bleeding and blood disorders community by showcasing a well-organized and easy to recognize brand. And on the next slide, you'll see sort of how we've done that. On the left, in the left-hand column, you'll see the flagship sub-brands of NBDF. Community Voices in Research, Handy, Victory for Women, Steps for Living, Better You Know, and Comprehensive Care Sustainability Collaborative. You'll notice that their logos use 4 of the blood droplets from the organization logo. And you'll notice that they also are used in different colors. So for example, Community Voices in Research aligns under the research pillar. So any sort of brands or programs that are established under the research pillar will use that red. Again, like Handy, Victory for Women, and so on, they use the purple. So, and they align with the education pillar. So anything, any education, new education programs, again, will use that purple color. And same with the Comprehensive Care Sustainability Collaborative. It uses sort of that dark teal. So as far as advocacy is concerned, any programs established there will also use that teal. In the center column, you can see the logos for the chapters, and they will all use the aqua colored. And these are the logos that you can see. And they also use the logo of the main organization, since they're just an extension of the main organization. And then in the right-hand column, you'll see the logo for Pathway to Cures, which was only slightly updated to just align the colors and the shape of the blood droplet, but otherwise didn't make any changes to them. And then the sub-brands, HemoAware and UniteWalk, just sort of because they had maintained so much brand equity in what they already had, we only changed them slightly in terms of font and colors, just to make sure that they aligned with the new brand architecture. And as you can see, for UniteWalk, the expectation is that that new logo will not go into use until 2025. So that's all I have. My colleague, Mary Kate, will now take over to walk you through some of sample applications of the brand.
Thank you. After we had the brand identity and all those kind of key elements put together, it was time to figure out how were we going to apply the branding as it goes out into the world. So we started with just the transition from really the old logo to the new logo. Then we moved on to things like a folder, the letterhead, business card. We created postcards announcing the rebranding in English and Spanish. And once we had kind of those initial elements done, we moved on to things that were a little more extensive, creating templates for things like white papers and one sheets, PowerPoint. So making sure there was a cohesive look across all of these materials. Then following materials being developed and all of these elements, we created the NBDF Brand Standards Guide. And the Brand Standards Guide is available to all NBDF partners. So if you are interested in getting a copy, you can reach out to the communications@hemophilia.org address that you see on the screen right now. And what the NBDF Brand Standards Guide has is it's all the usages of the logos. It's how the formats for the files of the logos and what you need them for, whether that's a print execution, a digital execution, if it's to go on items that you're producing, if it's giveaways, things like that. So we have all the guidelines so that the integrity of the brand stays intact as you're creating materials. It shows you imagery. It also has how you're using the brand elements in a way that's accessible. So it has an accessibility section and talks about the language that should be used around the brand personality, and some of the other things we've gone over here with the mission and vision. So it's extensive and it's very comprehensive if you'd like a copy to use. And then once everything was prepared, as Noreen mentioned, we launched during BDC, and we had a booth reflective of the new branding. We had giveaways, we had digital advertising around BDC, also around the HTCs before, during, and after BDC. And some of the giveaways we did were air tags for people that had been coming to BDC 30 years or more. And interestingly enough, before we went, we didn't know how many people would be at the 30-year mark. So we were going to keep going down in years, but there were more people than we even expected who had been going to BDC for 30 plus years. So that was a fun thing for us. One of the key elements of the booth was a digital mosaic. And what the digital mosaic did, it was used to be a nod to the history and then preparing for the future. It was all part of the 75th anniversary that was going on. So we used historic photos. And then we asked people at BDC to either upload a photo that they had on their phones from an NBDF event or past memory that they enjoyed, or to take a photo on site. So we had a lot of fun with that, and they uploaded. We're in the process now of finalizing it with all the different images we received before BDC, and then ones we took on site, and then from the different events during BDC. So you'll be seeing a final digital mosaic will be pushed out when that's completed. One of the main things that helped announce the launch of the brand at the conference was the video. And if you haven't had an opportunity to view it on the website yet, we are going to share it with you now.
Since 1948, our foundation has been one of the nation's leading organizations dedicated to serving people and families living with inheritable blood and bleeding disorders such as hemophilia, von Willebrand disease, ultra-rare platelet disorders, and many more. Now is the time to better reflect all of those that we serve.
As far back as 1956, the foundation was involved in research to advance the care of people with von Willebrand disease. This is really important. We want to make sure that we're inclusive of all bleeding disorders. By looking to our past, we can predict our future. And in that future, we're hoping that we can be as inclusive as possible and bring research and innovation to everybody in the community. You are the red thread that ties this community.
Patients with rare bleeding disorders are often forgotten, or they don't get the proper care in a general hematology office. And so I think it's important to be very inclusive and have them come to a center where there are specialists that can take care of bleeding disorders.
We're in the middle of a change in the world where people are being told, hey, we've been here for a long time. Why haven't we been equitably included? And I'm excited for a world where we recognize this has to happen.
For decades, the foundation has served the hemophilia community and other conditions. But even though our work supported ultra-rare individuals and families, as well as those with VWD and more, our name and look just did not reflect that. That's why I'm so excited to introduce the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation to you.
Our new name is one that's inclusive, trying to represent that entire bleeding disorders community. Based on our past, we think that this name really embraces what we're going to offer into the future by bringing everybody in, offering something.
We may have changed our name, but I guarantee you we have not changed our focus. Our lived experience experts, all family members, hemophilia treatment centers, our government partners, our industry partners, our chapters will remain our sole focus.
I think for many of us, change can be really hard, but change can be really great as well. And I think for a long time, we have been waiting to see some direction with what we should be calling ourselves. So I think this rebrand launch is an excellent opportunity for all of us to be united, to be on the same page, to give the same message and provide similar resources to the community.
As a mom of a son who has hemophilia, we're going to gain a bigger community, and then other people will gain the resources that we've already been receiving as well. So it'll be a positive outcome for us and for everyone else.
We are much more all-encompassing, really in terms of our research agenda, education, advocacy. I think we're going to do much better in the long run, being all-inclusive and having this kind of diversity.
We want to make sure that we're including all bleeding disorders and not just one sector. Having the national chapter take the lead on this gives a lot of the chapters that courage or that next step to be able to move forward, so that in the local chapter, we also can be all inclusive.
I'm so excited about what we can bring to the entire community.
The power of inclusivity unites us all.
The new tagline, innovate, educate, advocate, really communicates what the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation will do for this community.
Innovar, educar, advocar.
Everybody who's in this community is going to benefit from the new foundation, the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation.
So some of the next steps for the rebranding. One of the most important things is the transition phase. That will be really through the next year, because one of the important things is to keep the tie back to NHF as we're going out wider. So the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation logos, all the varieties will be tagged with formerly NHF. And then after a year, the formerly NHF will drop off the logos because the community will have been seeded with the new branding. Another element of the rebranding is that all of the social media platforms have been updated. So we'd love everyone to connect with NBDF on these new platforms, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. The new X, formerly known as Twitter, handles are there, and TikTok is a new one. If you haven't had a chance to see what has been happening with NBDF on TikTok, they've been doing some fun things since launching that platform at BDC. So if you want to take a minute and grab a screenshot or take a photo of these handles, we'll just give you a second to do that so you can connect there. And then we just like to open it up, as Fiona said. Hopefully people have submitted some questions in the chat.
Great. Thank you very much, Noreen and Mary Kate. We do just want to re-emphasize that there's an opportunity for you to ask questions now. Please put your questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer all of your questions. If there's any questions that we don't get to, you can also always send them into communications@hemophilia.org. I think we've been joined by a few more people now for this part of the presentation. We have Brett Spitali, who is joining us. He is the VP of Advancement at NBDF, as well as Ilana Ostrini, who is the Senior Director of Public Relations and Communications. We have Michael Krasnoy, who is the Vice President of Chapter Services. And I believe, do we also have Dr. Valentino? Dr. Len Valentino, who is the CEO and President of NBDF. So please feel free to let us know your questions for all of the team. Maybe I can start with one question that did come in earlier on. Appropriately enough, perhaps this came in on Instagram. And the question was asking, and I think you may have spoken briefly about this, but why is the logo so colorful? This person says that they like it, but they're just wondering why so colorful.
So the logo is so colorful just to make sure that we're being inclusive and to represent the idea that the rebranded organization really represents so many different conditions, not just hemophilia anymore. So we want to just make it clear in the visual identity that we're serving a much larger community, more inclusive, and just really be more equitable.
And I would add that the selection of not just different colors, but that bright color palette is the energy and the power of the community all coming together was part of the decision.
Great, thank you. Another question that we've received is they've said that they understand the name change has been initiated to be more inclusive of other inherited bleeding disorders like VWD. Will NBDF also be including bleeding disorders such as ITP and hemolytic anemia? And if so, how will NBDF ensure that chapters receive the support, especially in education, for these disorders which they have maybe not been involved with in the past?
I could start that one, and then maybe Len, if I miss anything, can chime in there. But we're currently undergoing a landscape analysis right now as we speak. We're looking at polling audiences, polling the community, having conversations with the community, with community members at several different levels, and really looking into what disease states or what inheritable bleeding blood disorders we will be representing moving into the future. Right now, we're continuing down the path that we've always continued down to serve individuals with VWD, rare, ultra rare. But what the landscape analysis will do is set a path for us to know where exactly we're going the future here. This should be completed by the end of this year, going into Q1 next year, and we should have a clear path that we're going to share with everyone, including the chapters. So that is that's the where. And as far as the chapter support is concerned, once we find out, after the landscape analysis, we'll look at what some of the chapter needs are right now. We're currently working with Michael Krasnoy, who's online, and the chapter services team and some of the chapters. We have a chapters team of a group of chapters that we're getting together so we can get input from them once we do have that landscape analysis in place, and to be able to find out what they are, where the need is, and what we can do to make sure that we fulfill that need.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, so the only thing that I'll add to that is, I think that it's important for us to recognize areas that are in need. So for example, the question included ITP. And the Platelet Disorder Support Association has excellent services and support for people who live with ITP, both acute and chronic ITP. That's not necessarily an area where we feel that we might be able to make an impact, because there's already services and support that's provided to that population. We really want to find areas where there isn't support and services being provided. So on the other hand, an area like thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, or TTP, might be an area where we can consider moving into, but that landscape analysis will be really important for that. The other question about hemolytic anemias. Hemolytic anemias really aren't bleeding disorders, they are blood disorders. Again, that would depend on whether there really is a substantial need for support in that community. We don't understand exactly what the landscape is there. There's a number of physician organizations who support those communities, but we have to get more information. And again, I think in terms of providing support to chapters, no matter what areas we decide that we're going to go into, we need to be able to, one, develop the capacity at the national level, and then bring that into the local level by supporting chapters through educational programs, through advocacy programs, and of course through financial support that would help them bring those capabilities to their community members. So it's not an easy process, nor is it a short process. I think this is something that can be done over the long term. But again, it's going to require more investigation and teamwork, and really having input from the community. So, if you see gaps in your community where, we might be able to make an impact, we want to know about that. So it's really important that, we continue the communication, both from the local levels to NBDF and NBDF into the local communities. So I hope that helped answer that question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. We've got a question that's come from Nikita in the Oklahoma Hemophilia Foundation, and they're asking whether the brand standard guide will have the process of all of the components of where to begin with the rebrand for the chapters, and whether there is support for this.
I can take that. Thank you, Nikita, for the question. So for our national or merged chapters within the foundation, we are engaging in a process and working tight-knit and closely with them to make sure everyone has the support and resources they need over the next year for rolling this out. For affiliated chapters, we are encouraging the use of the new branding and are happy to share that brand guide with you and partner in some ways that you can use it. So long story short, yes, if you reach out to us at communications@hemophilia.org, we are happy to help. And there will be further resources for chapters coming along the next 6 months.
Thank you. Fantastic. We've got a question coming in asking, I appreciate inclusiveness with more bleeding disorders being included, and that means more people. How will you fund for other disease state areas, especially if funding is already tight for education for hemophilia and women with bleeding disorders? I guess it's a question of, you have a larger group of people that you need to work with and for. It's going to take more resources. Do you have a strategy for this?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And, you know, as these other communities are evaluated, I think that's one of the things that we have to evaluate along with it is, you know, where are financial resources available? So I'll go back to the previous question about hemolytic anemia. There's a number of industry partners who are developing novel therapeutics for hemolytic anemias that have never been part of our partnership opportunities. So those, if we were going to be providing services and support to people living with hemolytic anemias, then we would be appealing to those companies as well as other organizations that support those sorts of disease states. So I think the opportunities are commensurate with the support opportunities that we might be able to identify. It's pretty clear that we're not going to be able to squeeze any more juice from the current, you know, fruit that we have. So we need to find new opportunities. And one of those is really expanding the portfolio of disease states that we serve, communities that we serve, and then also looking for more philanthropic opportunities, both at the corporate level, but also at the community-based individual giving level. So for example, being able to appeal to people if we decide that we are going to provide support for people living with hemolytic anemia. And maybe it's direct appeals to people in that hemolytic anemia community for direct donor support and provide opportunities for individual giving into that community to help raise the funds that would be necessary to provide the services and support for that particular community. So again, this is not an easy single step process. It's going to require innovation, and it's going to require some committed time and effort to bring those new resources to the community.
I can add a little bit to that as well too. You know, since I've been here at NHF, it's been 7 years for me now. You know, one of our priorities has been diversifying our revenue stream. The community has heard us talk about that quite a bit. And like Len said, this gives us an opportunity to look in different areas and look under different rocks as far as funding is concerned. So it's a great opportunity for us.
Great, thank you very much. We've had a question coming in about the Spanish translation of the logo, and this person would be interested to hear a bit more about its intended use. I believe NHF did not have a Spanish version, so it's now that there is a Spanish version, what's sort of the vision for using that? And then is there an intention, maybe a vision to have something in other languages as well eventually?
At this time, we don't necessarily have plans for other languages. That doesn't mean it's totally off the table forever. If there is that need, we will assess it. But we do have a lot of events historically and upcoming that are Spanish only speaking events. So it is a little bit discordant for attendees when they feel so much support, but it's not reflected in the materials that are being handed to them. So it really is for those Spanish specific materials and events. And again, if anyone needs that logo for any approved purposes, they can email communications@hemophilia.org to receive it. So thank you for that question.
Great, thanks very much. Another question that we've received is asking, with the new name, branding, and increased community base, could you discuss metrics for improving access to care, especially diagnosis and coverage for women and girls who are affected? And this individual is hearing about many people with 2X chromosomes that are not diagnosed early in life, and so they're not diagnosed in time to prevent and reduce complications.
Len, you want to take a stab at that one? I think you're
Fiona, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I'll see if I can give it another go. I think that they're asking about metrics on maybe seeing whether this change is going to help improve access to diagnosis and care in a timely fashion to people who maybe previously have not fitted into the tent of strictly hemophilia, men and boys with hemophilia. They're referring to people with 2 X chromosomes who are not getting diagnosed early enough to receive the treatment they need and prevent complications. And I think they're thinking, with this new branding and name and increased community base, how can we see whether that's helping?
Well, obviously, that's the intent, is to be able to provide services and support to more individuals, whether they have hemophilia or other inherited bleeding disorders. The exact metrics of how that could be measured, I think, remain to be determined. I think this is, clearly it's a new area for NBDF to be moving into. Women and girls, people with the potential to menstruate is an area that is really in its nascent form, both at the US level as well as at the global level with WFH, as well as EHC. So I think that we're all learning together as to how we can make the greatest impact. And I think it's going to be a continuing collaboration and partnership with our hemophilia treatment centers to identify ways to provide those services and support, but also to measure the impact of the things that we're doing, whether it's directly through NBDF or things that we're doing with the hemophilia treatment centers. So I think the metrics are something that remains to be determined, but I'm hopeful that we will see positive movement to be able to provide more support and services for these individuals who desperately need access to care.
Great, thank you very much. Those are all of the questions we've received so far. I wanted to maybe give an opportunity to Michael if he wanted to say anything about, if he wanted to share anything with the chapters about what they might expect or what they might look to NBDF for if they are looking at their own updates. Is that something you'd like to speak to, Michael?
Well, as Brett had mentioned, we're going to be putting together a group, working group of chapter leaders that will help us inform the next phases of this rollout and what it will look like for the chapter community. And I think as those conversations organically occur at the chapter level, we are happy to work with chapters that may wish to change their name, as well. I know at last analysis, about 18 of our 52 chapters have a name that is very close, either Bleeding Disorder Alliance or maybe Hemophilia and Bleeding Disorder foundations. And so I think we'll see continued alignment over time. And the chapter services team is happy to work with chapters that have those questions to help be a liaison to Brett and his team with anything that might be helpful. So happy to play that role for chapter leaders as they need that.
Great, thank you very much. I guess I'm just going to throw a quick question out to Brett, just out of curiosity. Have you had any conversations from partners about, beyond the umbrella of NBDF itself, about other people interested in updating their names? There are still quite a few hemophilia organizations out there that I think do work with people with a lot of different bleeding disorders. Just curious as to whether you think anybody else is maybe going to make this move.
That's a great question. I certainly can't speak for them, but I think it would be beneficial to at least look at the entire landscape and make that consideration. We're still here to work very closely with all the organizations in this space, like we have been. We feel as though we have a leadership role in the space, and I think that this is very very reflective of that. I think you heard Michelle Kim in the video saying we can be difficult, but change can also be an opportunity and very exciting. And we hope everyone looks at it like that in the community. I can say this, that we have strong relationships with our HTCs, but this is helping to strengthen those relationships with our HTCs as well too, because they've been treating these rare, ultra rare blood and bleeding disorders at the HTCs already. So it's almost like a welcome to the party kind of situation for us when we made this change. So I'm hopeful everyone will take a look and we can, tackle this together, but we're here to help partner and continue to partner rather with organizations in the space still.
Great, thank you very much. Oh, you may have one more question. It's my friend Lawrence in the UK. I knew I could count on Lawrence to come with a question. Thank you, Lawrence. So Lawrence is congratulating the NBDF and its partners for the name and brand change. His question is primarily for Dr. Valentino. He'd like to know what the reaction has been from other PAG, and I'm going to guess that's patient groups, from their leaders outside of the US. From a UK perspective, hemophilia has a lot of political weight due to the contaminated blood and the public inquiry, which is very current in the UK at the moment. Their report is due this autumn, and negotiations are continuing with their government at the moment. So how did you take the US community's own history of contaminated blood into account with your name and brand change? This is a sensitive topic, and there may have been some strong feeling and emotions involved in this. Lawrence is sort of guessing. So Len, did you?
Yeah, so I think overall it's been very positive. I just came back from a international meeting in Italy, and in talking to international colleagues, it was overwhelmingly positive. I think embracing the HIV/AIDS crisis is something that we went into this eyes wide open and understanding the challenges that brings, and where our organization has played a role in that, sometimes not so positively, but I think it's been an open and honest conversation with our own community about that. And on the international area, it's been overwhelmingly positive for us.
Great, thank you very much for that. We have another international question that maybe I can put to you, Len. This has come from Argentina, and it's a little bit outside of the branding question, but I think you might be able to give an answer here. This individual from Argentina is asking how many organizations there are in the US for bleeding disorders, and they're also curious as to whether emicizumab or factor VII therapy are in use in the US.
I can help with that. I think Len's a little bit in transition there. But as far as organizations in the US, I can speak to the ones that I know in the hemophilia space. I'm sure there's a lot of small outliers out there as well too. And there's smaller. There's also the rare, the ultra rare. That some may have representatives, organizations for their disease state, and some may not. And some of them are just really small, unfortunately, because the ultra rare disease states. But there's the usual, the ones that we work with, HFA, Coalition for Hemophilia B, Committee 10,000, to name just a few that we have worked with in the past, or are actively at the Bleeding Disorders Conference. Then internationally, obviously, there's WFH that we work very closely with as well too, and a lot of our international organizations are just that we've twinned with in the past, like India and other international organizations that we work closely with as well too. So those, we'll continue those relationships and continue to deepen those relationships and those partnerships, just adding to what we're currently doing with them.
Great, thank you. Sorry for putting Len on the spot there. In answer to the question about the recombinant 7A and the emicizumab, I am certainly not a medical practitioner, but it is my understanding that both of those therapeutic options are available to some people in the US with hemophilia.
As far as I know, yes, but I'm the same boat, not a medical practitioner. So
I think those are all of our questions in that case. And so I'd really like to thank Mary, Kate, and Noreen, Brett, Michael, Ilana, and Dr. Valentino for taking the time to join us this afternoon. We really appreciate your time and your expertise and everything that you shared with us today. This webinar has been recorded, and someone did ask about this earlier, and it has been recorded, and it will be available on Friday, September 15th at hemophilia.org under the events tab. If you select past events, then you can find all of our archived webinars there. Also available in the events tab is the schedule of upcoming webinars in this series. Please join us next week when we will hear about the burden on parents of children with moderate or severe von Willebrand disease, the impact of clinical data. Thank you for joining us this afternoon and have an excellent week.
Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you.